Greetings. How is everyone today? Welcome to the Status of Women and Children's Report for Tennessee and Shelby County. We're so excited to have each of you join us today. I am Patria Johnson. I'm the Director of Grants and Programs for the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis. The Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis was very pleased to partner with the University of Memphis, with Dr. Elizabeth Gillespie, on this awesome report that really underscores and illuminates the salient issues impacting women and children in Shelby County and Tennessee. This work has been tremendous. It's been long overdue because a report of this magnitude has not been published in this region in over 2 decades. So we are very excited. I just have to do a little hand clap there virtually, how proud and excited we are about this work. And I am pleased to introduce the presenters that will share more about this work on today. We have Dr. Elizabeth Gillespie. She is the assistant professor in the Department of Public and Not-for-Profit Administration in the School of Urban and Public Affairs and Policy. She is an affiliate faculty for the Institute of Philanthropy and Not-for-Profit Leadership for the University of Memphis. And she's joined in this work by Dr. B.J. Fletcher. He is the visiting professor in the Maxine Goodman Levin School of Urban Affairs in the Levin College of Public Affairs and Education at Cleveland State University. Also, a partner in this work is graduate assistant to Dr. Gillespie, Whitney McHouston. She is a graduate student in the Master's Program of Public Administration, also in the Department of Public and Not-for-Profit Administration at the University of Memphis. So as you listen today to the presentations, we want you to go ahead and feel free to enter questions in the chat box, as those questions will be fielded at the end of the presentations. But before I toggle over to Dr. Gillespie, I want to take one other point of privilege and celebration about this report in the webinar today. As many of you all know, the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis has been on a large journey to improve economic well-being for women and children in the city of Memphis through place-based work, through our Vision 2020 plan, and now our Vision 2025 plan, which is aimed at reducing poverty and creating pathways to economic mobility and empowerment for women and children. So this report gave us an opportunity to learn, to participate in learning, to do research that would inform our strategy. So will lead us to transformational change in Memphis and Shelby County. And I venture to say even the world. We're just gonna claim it all today. This is a great body of work. So I am very delighted and pleased to toggle over to Dr. Elizabeth Gillespie. Thank you.
So much. Thank you everyone for being here today during your lunch hour for what we hope is a very informative webinar on the status of women and children in Tennessee and Shelby County, with a special look at women's philanthropy in Shelby County and a look at nonprofits serving marginalized populations right here in Memphis and doing the work of social change. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Gillespie. I research nonprofits, philanthropy, and social change. I actually developed and teach a master's course called Philanthropy, Nonprofits, and Social Change. My specific area of expertise is grant-making foundations, women's foundations and funds, women and girls philanthropy, and social change. Organizations and feminist organizations. So I actually, along with Dr. Fletcher, have a paper forthcoming in publication with the Journal of Social Equity and Public Administration on women's foundations, feminist organizations, and social change. I'm very happy to be here with you to present this research that I've worked very closely with Patria on. I wanted to take a moment to give her a shout out. We first talked about this report 2 years ago. It was a vision of hers and former President CEO Ruby Bright's. And this report really is the brainchild of the Women's Foundation for a Greater Memphis. So we appreciate their sponsorship. I'll let Dr. Fletcher introduce himself.
Thank you, Dr. Gillespie. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. I'm Dr. BJ Fletcher. I'm at Cleveland State University in the Maxine Levin Goodman College of Urban. And so my research really focuses on aspects relating to social equity, and in particular, as it relates to social equity in public policy and public administration. And as I worked with Dr. Gillespie on the paper, also bringing in the conversation of the role for social equity in the nonprofit and philanthropic as it relates to social change. So I focus a lot of my research on public policy's role in addressing issues of social equity, and also looking at how that the social construction of policy impacts various populations, including women and children, members of the LGBTQIA community, migrant populations, and BIPOC. Those are my areas of research currently.
Thank you. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to share my screen and get started in just a minute, but I wanted to say, when Ruby Bright, the former president and CEO of the Women's Foundation, and Patria approached me about this report, the objective for them and soon for me really became more than just understanding women's and children's status in the state of Tennessee and Shelby County. We wanted to have a significant ripple effect. Together, we created a report to bring about social change, educating the public, policymakers, nonprofits, philanthropists, community leaders is a way to bring about social change. And we help them understand the needs and issues facing women and children in our state. Our report provides an opportunity to understand these needs and issues in light of the general well-being of these populations. All right, let's jump in, and I'm going to bear with me 1 second while I share my screen. So what will happen is that we'll present, and then we'll save the last 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes or so for questions and discussion. So please feel free, as Patria said, to enter your questions in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So the Women and Children's Status Report of 2023 is a unique and groundbreaking report that provides a comprehensive overview of the status of women in Tennessee after a gap of over 2 decades. It offers unprecedented insight into conditions of women and children in Shelby County, and is the country's first and only report of its kind in the sense that it's 92 pages long. It contains a wealth of invaluable and detailed information, not only on the status of women and children in the state, but also on women's philanthropy and nonprofit organizations that work for the betterment of marginalized and oppressed communities right here in Memphis. We hope you find this webinar informative, and please consider giving this extensive and lengthy report a look through. It really does provide as much information as we possibly can on these topics. You can find the report on our host website, the Institute for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership. The Institute for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership at the University of Memphis promotes effective philanthropy, advances nonprofit leadership practice, and strengthens the nonprofit sector through education and research. This image is a snippet of our website. We also have the 2023 State of the Sector Nonprofit Report. Under recent peer-reviewed publications, you can find our research papers. And we work directly with nonprofits in Memphis in various capacities. So please feel free to reach out if you're interested in collaboration. I also wanted to take a minute to say that I'm very excited that the Amazing Women's Foundation for a Greater Memphis sponsors our report. Their sponsorship of the 2023 Status of Women and Children in Tennessee and Shelby County report is helping to complete one of the Women's Foundation's Vision 2025 objectives. It's actually goal 2, to engage in participatory learning, conduct research, and build relationships to empower and create transformational change. As someone who studies women's foundations and funds, I've interviewed 38 women's foundations across the country, 23 were in person, and I've surveyed these organizations. And what I can tell you is I have come to appreciate the valuable work that the Women's Foundation for a Greater Memphis is doing to bring about social change. Their community building efforts in 38126 and their expanding work demonstrate a commitment to empowering communities in addition to empowering individuals. Since 1996, the Women's Foundation has granted $35 million to nonprofit organizations making a difference in doing the work of social change, providing much needed funding to marginalized communities. They've awarded grants to 185 local nonprofits, and more than 4,000 families have been served through their 38126 COVID-19 response efforts. This is a remarkable demonstration of impact, and it is funding for nonprofits doing the in the trenches work, changing lives and communities. So we thank them for their sponsorship again. Also, let me quick call out the collaborators here. We have Dr. Fletcher, who's with us here today, Dr. Hafer, my colleague in the Department of Public and Nonprofit Administration, and my former graduate assistant and Master of Public Administration graduate, Caitlin Kyle. They each helped to make this report possible. So next, Dr. Fletcher is going to walk us through the methodology of the report, and then I'll pick back up with women's philanthropy.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gillespie. Yeah, the approach that we took for this report was a complete sort of survey of a number of areas, trying to get a complete picture of what was kind of going on at the time to understand, right, the context and the situation. And so we used a variety of methods, both surveys, interviews, content analysis, and secondary data. Some of the secondary data that we used came from areas such as the Census Bureau. We used Bureau of Labor Statistics, other reports that were on the topic or related to the sub areas in which Dr. Gillespie will talk about momentarily. And then also really just having conversations with both the donors of and the nonprofit grantees of the Women's Fund for a Greater Memphis. And so all of those gave us valuable insights into the information that we received today. So there were donor surveys, in-person conversations, leveraging other data sets out there. Saying that, there are a couple of small limitations due to focus areas or lack of information out there or participation, just given the nature of the structure. So some of the secondary data is limited on its scope or its focus. In the study, isn't specific areas focusing on individuals with disabilities, non-binary, and members of the LGBTQIA population. But what is important is that all of these methods and the surveys, the secondary data, the interviews, the valuable insights provided by the donors and the nonprofit grantees all allow us, right, to have this conversation so that way we are able to measure the status of women and children. And so it's very comprehensive by gender and race, historical comparisons, and also provides great insight into both Tennessee and Shelby County.
Thank you. So part of what this report does is celebrate women's philanthropy in Shelby County. And I would like to start with women's philanthropy. We'll move into the nonprofits that we surveyed before we get into the status of women and children. So we interviewed 5 philanthropists in Shelby County, each providing profound wisdom and insight into women's philanthropy. Those include Edith Kelly Green, Dr. Rosie Phillips Davis, Dorcas Young Griffin, Ellen Cooper Kleiss, and Deborah Clubb. It cannot be emphasized enough how remarkable these interviews are. I hope you check them out in the report. Women's philanthropy remains a subject that is understudied and often overlooked, with too few women's viewpoints represented in literature. Moreover, we have included interviews with 3 Black women philanthropists, making this achievement even more extraordinary. Women of color in particular are neglected in philanthropy, both in terms of research and funding opportunities. Notably, an alarmingly small percentage of philanthropic dollars are directed towards women and girls. Less than 2% of all philanthropic dollars are allocated to women and girls. And remember, as a country, we give $470 billion a year philanthropically. Only 5 to 7% of foundation funding goes to women, this demographic. And even more disheartening is the wealth of the wealthiest foundations, only 2% give to women and girls, and less than 0.5% of these wealthiest foundations give to women and girls of color. This indicates that women's foundations and women philanthropists are among the few organizations and individuals that support women's philanthropic efforts, support efforts to advance women and children. It's important to understand their motivations, practices, and giving tendencies. I'd like to highlight 2 of our interviewees. We have Edith Kelly Green. You can read about her amazing and storied life in the report. Edith's life story is truly remarkable. She grew up in Oxford, Mississippi under the care of her grandmother. She went on to achieve great success in her career. In fact, she made history as the first Black female vice president at FedEx. She is a breast cancer survivor, and her strength and resilience have inspired many. She's a founding member of 2 philanthropic organizations, the Women's Foundation for a Greater Memphis and Philanthropic Black Women of Memphis. Through these organizations, she has significantly impacted lives. Her achievements and contributions have earned her numerous accolades and much respect in her community. During the interview, we discussed her motivations, strategies, best practices, women's philanthropy, making a difference. One of my favorite quotes from Edith was, "Philanthropy has no limits. The objective is, do you make a difference in someone's life? Are you helping someone move to that next step either in their lives or to fulfill their dreams? Are you helping them to be a better than they are now and perhaps even better than you?" Very inspiring interview. As was the interview with Dr. Rosie Phillips Davis, a professor of counseling psychology at the University of Memphis and former vice president for student affairs. She's the co-founder of the National Multicultural Summit and Conference and Summit. Her research and advocacy projects address poverty, inclusion, vocational psychology, and ethics. She has received several distinguished awards throughout her career. And in 2022, the University of Memphis awarded her the Arthur S. Holman Lifetime Achievement Award. We also discuss her motivations, advice, strategies, giving strategies, why she supports the Women's Foundation, her hope for Memphis, and the power of women's philanthropy. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Phillips Davis is, "It's not just kindness and generosity, it's to make meaningful change. That's what it's about for me. It's not just giving your money, it's using things to make a difference in people's lives. And for me, that difference means making a difference in the world." I hope you check out their interviews. They're quite remarkable. So let me begin by discussing the importance of women's philanthropy and studying women's philanthropy. Women are becoming the face of philanthropy and are transforming philanthropic giving. So take a couple statistics into mind. 93% of high net worth women give to charity. The number of wealthy women in the US is growing twice as fast as the number of wealthy men. Women add 5 trillion annually to their global wealth, outpacing the overall growth of the wealth market. Women make up 13.7% of ultra high net worth individuals, which has never happened in the history of power and money, right? So that's a 31% increase annually, outpacing global increases. We control 80% of consumer spending. 44% of women are the primary breadwinners in their households. 45% of American millionaires are women, and 11.9% of billionaires. We do know some things about women philanthropists. Women are motivated to give when they know their gift will make a difference, and they want to be involved and connected to the organizations they support. They're more likely to give online, give to crowdfunding, give on Giving Tuesday. I think 64% of those who give on Giving Tuesday are women. They are more likely to give as their income increases than men. but there's so much more to learn. And this research, sponsored by the Women's Foundation, sheds light on women's giving practices and motivations, as well as their perspectives on the role and importance of women's philanthropy. So on the left, you'll see the demographics of survey participants. I want to draw your attention to the giving motivations of women philanthropists. For Shelby County women, major motivators include making a difference, addressing social issues, and giving back to their community. Women's philanthropy is important for, according to the survey, not on this slide here, for being at the decision-making table, for women having a say in issues and solutions, and for influencing policies. We know now because of this survey that women are strategic when they give. They support specific missions and programs. They tend to give to multiple organizations, whereas men tend to give to their church and their alma mater. So we really truly learned so much from the philanthropists who support the Women's Foundation. Here we're looking at the potential of women's philanthropy according to survey participants, specifically what more philanthropy can do. And the top 3 answers were engaging in policy advocacy, educating others like the Women's Foundation is doing with this report, and cultivating more women philanthropists. So the question really becomes, how do we get more women involved in philanthropy? Also not on this slide, the role and importance of women's philanthropy. Survey participants said to empower women and children, to advocate on behalf of women and children, in terms of women influencing policies. They want to be part of the issue and the solution. They wanted to be represented and engaged in social change. And women's philanthropy has the power and potential to do that. And Dr. Fletcher will talk to us about the nonprofits based here in Memphis.
Thank you, Dr. Gillespie. Yeah, so the nonprofit space here, what we're looking at really is that this is stemming from new research, right? That we're really trying to understand more about the impact of social change through nonprofits based in Memphis. And the numbers here, I'll let you look at those, but a few things that I want to highlight before we move into the next couple of sections really is that there are a few things that stood out through the conversations and the interviews that would have a much sort of greater impact, right, for the ability to have the social change, right, that we're looking at here. And the areas that really stood out through the conversations and through the surveys that the nonprofits, the interviewees all sort of talked about were areas of technology, brand awareness, right? Staff development, right? Development for staff, being able to train staff, and being able to recruit staff, that all sort of have that intersection around these core missions, these core values of having an impact in the community and thinking about what that means, right, to move forward with this aspect of social change. And so the nonprofit surveys really sort of touch on these key areas as kind of where any of the nonprofits or the interviewees see great potential, right, for having an impact on social change. And then this here highlights a great sort of part of the conversation about where the social change is happening, where it's going to continue to happen in the populations that the nonprofits in the area are serving, right? And we really think about how the nonprofits are social change organizations, right? So they're having an impact in their community as a social change agent. And so that's really an important piece to the conversation, right? Is that how are we as sort of the nonprofits in the organization having an impact and being a agent for social change? And so really those all come together when we think about how we collaborate with one another, where we're moving forward, what benefits, right, that are sort of being able to derive from our collaborations in this space, and how do we design our new programming to engage for advocacy, right? These all touch back on points that Dr. Gillespie made prior, but these are all sort of critical, right, for the various focus areas, both in the technology, the staffing, the training, but also the community areas in which the nonprofits really hope to sort of move forward the conversation about social change. And these focus areas that sort of emerged from the conversations and interviews really focus on aspects of education, economic insecurity, poverty, youth development, housing and community development, women and girls, large conversation about how that impacts their ability in all of these areas. Also low-income families, job placement, and food insecurity. These are all sort of core pieces to how the nonprofits are coalescing around the idea of being social change agents in the community.
Okay, so before we get you to the hardcore stats on women and children's well-being and overall standing and status in Tennessee and Shelby County, we did include literature in the report. Part of probably why it contributes to it being 92 pages long, right? But we wouldn't be academics if we didn't include a little literature. So I want to go through some of this, which is in the report, but I got 3 slides on it. We are focused on economic security, employment, and education. When women do well, everyone does well, as the saying goes. Women tend to invest a higher portion of their earnings into their families and communities than men, which according to the U.S. Department of State stimulates economic growth and more stable societies. The United Nations argues women's equal access to economic resources and control of those resources make possible increased development, improvements in the economy, and a reduction of poverty. Women's economic security is also said to reduce inequalities in policies and institutions. Key to economic security is economic independence and stability, which makes gender equality possible. Barriers to women's economic security are deeply rooted and interconnected. So the difference between men and women's earnings, which we'll talk about in a few slides, said to encumber economic growth by constraining family incomes and spending power. Research indicates across all family types, women of color are key to providing economic support for their families. Women of color have the largest wage gaps and face the biggest barriers to economic security, which reflects the effects of intersecting racial, ethnic, and gender biases that threaten the economic security of women of color and their families. The disadvantages faced by women of color in gaining economic security are systemic. They're deeply rooted, including employment practices and policies, among others. Women's labor force participation benefits include increased household income and overall economic growth. When women's labor force participation increases, so does the GDP. It's said that companies with more than 30% women leadership are significantly more likely to outperform those between 10 and 30% women. Fortune 500 companies with the highest representation of women on boards financially outperform other companies. Gender diverse teams have higher sales and profits. The higher percentage of women in the workforce, the better the employee engagement and retention. However, Brookings notes that though women now enter professional schools in numbers nearly equal to men, they are still substantially less likely to reach the highest echelons of their professions. It's hindered by women's family roles, discrimination, changing economy. Barriers include access to equal opportunity and workplace rules and norms that fail to support work-life balance and leads to missed potential and a loss of the productive capacity of the economy. For Black women, their higher labor force participation rate has not turned into higher earnings. Persistent disparities between Black and white women have remained unchanged or even grown. Barriers to women of color's advancement, leadership, and employment overall is partly due to a lack of support, coupled with intersecting issues of race, sexism, and gender norms. And finally, education for girls especially. Education leads to more agency, increased economic opportunities, reduced early pregnancies and marriages, reduced child and maternal mortality rates. Let's not even get started on maternal mortality rates in the United States. Better educated children, more increased participation in politics, and so on. Education, according to the United Nations, is the pathway to gender equality. However, barriers to women and girls' education remain, including unintended pregnancy, gender-based violence, gender stereotypes, and inequitable policies. Importantly, for women and girls of color, they face barriers to education, including exclusionary school discipline. They're disciplined at higher rates, lack of research and data, opportunity gaps, economic instability, and too few persons of color in leadership and academic positions. So that's the context in which we're operating when we go to look at the economic security, employment, and education of women and girls, or sorry, women and children. So now we're looking at the status of women and children in Tennessee and Shelby County. This slide is specific to Shelby County and our survey respondents. So the reason we're focused on economic security, employment, and education is because those are the issues identified by our survey respondents as the biggest issues facing women in the county. As you can see, the fact that none of the survey respondents strongly agree that women and children's status is improving in Shelby County speaks to the overall well-being of these populations, and that more really must be done to advance these populations. Related to poverty, in Tennessee, 15.2% of females and 18% in Shelby County live below the poverty line. So take this into consideration. In Shelby County, there's roughly 492,000 women. So that's 89,000 women living in poverty out of a total population of 924,000. In Tennessee, there's roughly 3.468 million women. So that's 527,000 women in Tennessee living in poverty out of a population of 6.9 million. In Tennessee, 6.4% of females live 50% or below the poverty line, and 8.5% in Shelby County. That's incredible. The face of poverty across races is women, with the exception of the Hispanic or Latino population. 55.3% of females across all ages and races live below the poverty line in Tennessee. Women between 25 and 34 have the highest poverty rates, as does Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander population. We have about a 0.5% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander population in the state. So poverty stats, poverty is a little higher in Shelby County. It does have the highest population of counties in the state. In Tennessee, there are more than 1.7 million families. 197,000 of those live in poverty. 11.2% of families across races live below poverty. 51.3% are female-headed households without spouse present. Of the percentage that are female-headed households, 85% have children. So 85% of all single-parent households experiencing poverty in Tennessee are women, and 83% in Shelby County are women with children. So of the more than 47,000 children in Shelby County living in poverty, 83% live with single mothers. Also, this is not in the report, but did you know that roughly 44.6% of babies born in Tennessee are born to single mothers? It's a totally overlooked population of women. 29% of women in Tennessee and 30% in Shelby County with no spouse live below the poverty line. And 18% in Tennessee and 19% Shelby County living below poverty worked full time the entire year. So that indicates there's a huge population of women working full-time and still living in poverty. The status of women in earnings. Here we have by the dollar, and that's a comparison to white male dollar. We have weekly and annual earnings. So to begin with, we have what males earned in Tennessee and Shelby County compared to what females earn. In Tennessee, this is outrageous, but $9,090. Men earn more than women in Tennessee. That's $757 a month. In Shelby County, that's number of $7,980 a year, or roughly $665 a month. In 2020, women earned 169 less than their male counterparts in Tennessee. And lastly, you can see that while on average women earn less per white male's dollar, Shelby County women earn slightly more than Tennessee broadly. A few things to note on this slide. Asian women have not only achieved earnings parity with white males in the state of Tennessee, they earn 1 cent more than the white male dollar. Conversely, Hispanic and Latina and Black women earn far less. Asian women are at $11.65 weekly, white women $9.39, Black women $8.02, and Hispanic or Latino women $7.33. And Tennessee has about a 6% Hispanic Latino population. So you can see the annual earnings and the disparity across races. So listen, while increased annual wages and Asian women achieving earnings parity with white men are great things, you can clearly see that the wage gap persists and there are racial disparities across women's earnings. I wanted to highlight earnings based on leadership in STEM fields. Here you can see the percent female to male earnings for various management roles, as well as computer engineering and science occupations, computer and mathematical occupations, architecture, engineering occupations. So we know that STEM fields are higher paying fields. In Tennessee, across management occupations, this is mind-boggling. Males earn $23,925 more annually than women in those management positions. The smallest wage gap is in mathematical occupations, where men still earn $12,274 more annually than women in the state of Tennessee. In Shelby County, the gap is a little smaller, but it persists. In management occupations, men earn $32,454 more annually than women in similar positions. Again, that's incredible. The significantly lower earnings in Tennessee between males and females suggest a weaker economy, communities, and families due to the restrictions disproportionately placed on women and their earning potential. Failing to encourage and actively support women's equal earnings and closing the pay gap is a missed opportunity, as women are often breadwinners for their families. They are further oppressed due to lack of access and control over financial assets, which leads to greater poverty. Being paid less than their male counterparts prevent women from building their economic security. And women of color especially are worse off economically than white women, except for Asian women in terms of earnings. So this speaks to broader issues of economic racial disparity. Here we're looking at women's labor force participation rate by age of children. You can see that except in one category, working or mothers with children work more in 2020 than they did in 2010. And again, the high labor force participation rate of Black women has not equaled higher earnings for Black women in the state of Tennessee. This is interesting. Women are the majority of workers in Tennessee across 14 occupations and across 13 in Shelby County. While the majority of workers, we just learned a couple slides ago that women are not paid the same rate as men. You can see where we make up the majority in management, business, science, arts, and occupations in Tennessee and Shelby County, but we make tens of thousands of dollars less annually in the state and in the county. Here we're looking at class of worker by percent female in Tennessee. So we have dark blue is Tennessee and light blue Shelby County. You can see that women's entrepreneurship is at the lower end. Regarding self-employment, women are the majority in most government sectors and certainly in the nonprofit sector in both Tennessee and Shelby County. Considering women hold up the nonprofit sector in the state, it'd be interesting to know how many are in leadership positions. We also have occupation by sex, percent male, percent female for management STEM fields. So while women make up more than half of management fields, they're underrepresented in STEM fields, those higher paying fields. The implication is that we need to encourage women and girls into the STEM fields. Education, a few more slides on women, and then we'll look at women and children, and we'll wrap up with recommendations. The two graphs depict educational attainment for women by race in Tennessee and Shelby County. So for reference, Tennessee is about 78% white, 17% Black, 6% Hispanic, about 2%, two or more races, and then the rest are incredibly low, 0.1% for Native Hawaiian, for example. In Shelby County, it's 52% Black, 41% white, and 5.6% Hispanic. We're also examining sex by age, 18 years and over, by educational attainment in Tennessee. And you can see women make up the majority of our educated population at 54.3% in Tennessee and 56.3% in Shelby County. But we are, again, paid significantly less, even with the same educational background. Did you actually know across the country, Black women are the most educated population and yet are underrepresented in leadership positions? Across Tennessee, more women graduate than males. So when we're talking about the college system of Tennessee awards, universities include UT Chattanooga, UT Knoxville. Locally governed universities include the University of Memphis, East Tennessee State University, and then there are numerous community colleges across the state. And you can see how the significant difference between women and men graduating across Tennessee. For the population 25 years and older, women hold more degrees than men except for professional school or doctorate degrees in both Tennessee and Shelby County. 59% of associate degrees in Tennessee, 53% bachelor's degree, almost 59% master's degrees, which is incredible. Shelby County, you can see the numbers here. Women are pursuing higher education at higher rates. Where women are really underrepresented is at the doctoral level. So that sort of wraps up the status of women. As you can see, it doesn't paint the best picture of the overall status of women in the state and Shelby County. So there's much work to be done. And next, Dr. Fletcher will walk us through the status of children's well-being in Tennessee.
Thank you, Dr. Gillespie. Yeah, there are a couple of things. I know we're coming up to time here, so I want to touch on a few things that are important here that stand out, and then we can, if we want to look at them during the Q&A, we can come back to that. But what I really want to highlight here that sort of has come out of the conversation that relates back to what Dr. Gillespie was saying, sort of and the family perspective, right? In looking at where areas are that the children in both Tennessee and Shelby County are experiencing aspects related to things like poverty, food insecurity, economic insecurity. And so just the slide here shows us some of those as a snapshot, but the adverse childhood experience is 17.8% of children in Tennessee experience one of these or a combination of these adverse experiences. And that's compared to 14.8% across the US. And so that ranks Tennessee 39th for adverse child experiences nationally. And so the other parts of that that speak to sort of the childhood quality of life is that there is a lack of green space, right? Outside activities and green space has become sort of diminished, especially in sort of the urban areas. And so urban green spaces have a huge impact, right, on positive impact on quality of life. And so that's one area in which sort of we see standing out. Another one is that the lack of access to broadband internet, one that is an expanding area. And so all of those pieces relate to that overall quality of life aspect in this context.
And I'm sorry, because of the time, we don't want to cut off Dr. Fletcher, but this is in the report. I hate to cut you off, Dr. Fletcher.
No, you're good. No, I just want this one, again, you can take a look at this real quick in the report. The last thing I'll say is on the next slide, and then we can move to Q&A, or recommendations in the Q&A. But really, the thing that I wanted to note here is that of all of the counties in the state, this breaks down where each of those proportions of educational outcomes relate to both broadly speaking in Tennessee, but also into Shelby County.
Thank you. And I'll just quickly point out, this is the Wheel of Social Change. This was designed by the Minnesota and Iowa Campus Connect. I actually did my undergrad at the University of Iowa. 12 approaches to work towards social change. So you have deliberative and reflective dialogue, like the conversation we're having now, advocacy and raising awareness, like the Women's Foundation is doing with this report, community building, such as their work in 38126, fundraising, giving, and philanthropy, so supporting local nonprofits and foundations like the Women's Foundation. I support a small nonprofit called I Am My Sister's Keeper, who support single mothers in Shelby County. So any of those type of nonprofits are contributing to social change, community and economic development. Again, you can look to the Women's Foundation and the great work they're doing in the poorest Memphis neighborhoods, voting and so forth. So you can act on your values and civic commitments. You can address immediate needs. You can support nonprofits, strengthen capacity of local residents. The point being, and I'll wrap this up here, the idea is that we're trying to convey is that every individual has the capacity to play a role in driving positive social change. There are a range of actions listed here that we can take regardless of our background, skills, and resources. These actions can be small, like educating ourselves, or big, like policy advocacy, but taking action, we can contribute to creating a more equitable and just society that benefits everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I know I took up a lot. I'm quite the talker, but let's open it up to you guys with questions and discussion.
Thank you. Let's all give Dr. Gillespie and Dr. Fletcher a virtual round of applause for a great presentation and a lot of intense data and compelling data that was shared in a very, very short time frame. So thank you for this wonderful body of work. I want to thank everybody for participating and putting your questions in the chat. I'm looking at the participants. We have such a diverse group of Women's Foundation staff members, board members, former president and CEO, Ruby Bright, grantee partners, grants committee. So I just want to do that huge shout out, but I'm going to go into the chat box, my chat, and just see some of the questions that actually surfaced. And one of the questions was that I want to go ahead and address was, how does an organization get invited to receive funding from the Women's Foundation for a Greater Memphis? That's simply through relationship building and us becoming familiar with the work that you do for us to determine if it aligns with our strategic plan and place-based approaches. So I have included my email and telephone number, so just send that over to me directly so that we can address that. So one of the questions that we heard that was in the chat, will participants receive a copy of this presentation?
I am very happy to email every participant a copy of the presentation and the report if you like. We are recording this, and so I will upload it to YouTube, and we'll be able to share a YouTube link with everyone. Look for that either on the Women's Foundation's website, and we'll share it on our social medias, or on the Institute's website.
Thank you, Dr. Gillespie. So one of the first questions that was in the chat was, has there been any progress in adjusting the poverty line as it was set in the 1960s and to the only marginally and adjusted for inflation and true cost of living? So has there been any change in the way that the poverty line has been established as it was set since the 1960s?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not a poverty scholar, but not to my knowledge. Last I checked, the poverty line is 18,000. So again, when we look at those 83% of single women living in poverty in Tennessee with children, they're making less than $18,000 annually, which is absurd that any individual would live on that low of an income. But to my knowledge, no. I wish I had more insight for you. Dr. Fletcher, do you?
Yeah, I can speak a little to that. Poverty research is a part of where I focus. And so there haven't been any sort of major substantial changes to the way in which it originally was captured, outside of minor cost of living adjustments over time, but those are really minor, and also minor adjustments to region for uh, sort of place-based calculations, but all on the whole, they're pretty similar to how they were originally captured.
So would that speak to the Department of Health and Human Services poverty scale that actually it's, I believe there is minor, as you said, minor adjustments that annually that we see, and oftentimes we do refer to that one as a guide. Okay, so the next question has to do with, the question is, do you have a breakdown for the age and demographics by ethnicity?
I wish I did. You know, we collected 500 tabs of data in an Excel data base for this report, an insane amount of data. And I did not receive any breakdown beyond white non-Hispanic, black non-Hispanic. They'll break it down by that type of category, or they'll separate Asian from Native Pacific Islander, Native Alaskan. But beyond that, no, they did not provide racial breakdown by race and ethnicity. I wish they did. That would be super informative. Or if we understood why Asian women earn so much compared to other women, that would be interesting information to learn.
Absolutely, because it does beg the question, is there a full picture of what's there, for men, I would be remiss, speaking from the Women's Foundation, that I'm showing so much interest in the men, but it does seem like the data is speaking more towards the women and how the women are faring to some degree.
I would agree with that. So if you do check out the report, again, sponsored by the Women's Foundation, we did pour our hearts and soul in this report, and we hope that it presents you with a wealth of information, and that you use that information to inform your own decisions and how you give to nonprofit organizations, how you volunteer, understanding. I recently interviewed a woman philanthropist who said, I never hear about women's causes. I don't get anything in the mail about women's organizations. So there's maybe a marketing issue amongst women's causes, but now that you know women and girls status is not doing great in the state, maybe that's something you can support and how you contribute to social change. And any last questions for us? We appreciate your presence so much and for listening to our findings. And
yes,
thank you.
We do have a few minutes left on the hour. Are there other questions? We have the experts among us. Please post your questions.
Any questions on women's philanthropy? Again, we heard from the voices of Edith Kelly Green and Dr. Rosie Phillips Davis today. 2 amazing interviews out of 5 in the report. And it's so interesting to hear about their dynamics. I remember one thing Dr. Rosie Phillips Davis said was her mother used to clean houses, and when she got her first job, I don't know if it was a Memphis factory, she felt grown, she said. It's like you have to empower women through these opportunities for advancement. I was just reading a comment in the chat. That might be very well true.
Hey, good afternoon. Is it okay to come off mute, or do I need to type it in the chat?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. This has been amazing. This is Clarissa Joy from Rise Up Single Mom, nonprofit organization here in Memphis. I posed the question regarding poverty in the chat, the poverty line. And the reason I asked that is, just assuming if that poverty line were readjusted to the true cost of living and inflation factor since the 1960s, and it was raised. I wonder if that could trigger more funding, right, for these underserved communities. So, for example, if a single mom makes, right, $25,000 a year, we all know on this call that that's not a living wage. However, because she is an under $18,000 a year, she's going to be limited by the resources and benefits that she would get approved for. So until that line, is adjusted, these moms are missing out on so many resources that they could be taking advantage of.
I would agree. And have you heard of the benefits cliff?
I have not.
So the Women's Foundation for Colorado supports policy behind this. Essentially, what the benefits cliff means is that once you hit that arbitrary number they set, 18,000, you lose all your benefits. They don't taper you off. They're just gone. And as a result, women, single working mothers, they won't take promotions or better jobs elsewhere because even a slight increase in pay means that they lose all access to benefits. So it continues to hurt women in their financial capacity, essentially. Something very, check that out if you get a chance.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Gillespie. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say to Dr. Gillespie's point there. Yeah, I was going to mention the benefit cliffs that families run into, right? Because they are an arbitrary number. So for my research in food security and SNAP, right, we run into that happening quite a bit, where one week somebody may work an additional few hours that puts them right over the line. And so then they have to get, consider, right, do I work the additional hours to get the additional income that then won't actually offset the amount that I'm losing in benefits, right? So it's a very complicated sort of calculus that families are making around such an arbitrary cutoff.
Mm.
Thank you. I'm glad that you did raise the whole issue of benefits cliff, Dr. Gillespie, because this is something that the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis is very well aware of. And we have actually, spoken to the powers that be in different arenas on national, on regional, local levels, raising this whole issue because it is a real disincentive for women to advance slightly if we're going to just me taking an extra job and earning a little bit more money, if I'm going to lose all of the benefits. What we've been advocating for is that it should be a tapered approach, that you don't lose all of your benefits at one time. And so we're still working for that, because that has not come to full fruition as we had hoped, but we're definitely aware of it, and know that our women definitely needs additional support to address this issue. We are about an hour. Are there other questions? I don't want to call anybody out, but I do see some people that are here that if they want to say anything. Ruby Bright is on. I wanted to just call her name out. I didn't know if she wanted to say anything, but I did want to offer her a parting comment if she'd like to.
Hey, Tria, thank you. You're generous. I just take this opportunity to say thank you to Dr. Gillespie and Dr. Fletcher for, the taking on this task. And, what we wanted to do was bring light to the challenge that low-income women have, but also to lift up the energy of philanthropy that women are, leading the charge in Memphis, and hopefully stimulate the idea of working together. It is so wonderful to see so many nonprofit and community partners here, because we've got to look at where those gaps are and the challenges that we got to build bridges, if you will. And I won't get on a soapbox, because I think that most of you know my passion for this, but I just think that we can start to use some models. One is the place-based approach. The other is supporting families as they learn to, as they try to move themselves forward. You know, there's this unfortunate thing around rewarding people for doing what they should do, or, you know, providing them with resources while they build themselves, you know, up. And I just think that until you have some revenue coming in or supplemental revenue, it's more difficult for you to be able to pull yourself up and keep your family well. And so just thank you, Patria, for the opportunity to lift my voice around this, and just to salute all of you for your wonderful work in this space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Well, if all minds and hearts are clear, Dr. Gillespie, Dr. Fletcher, do you have other parting comments before we give everyone back their day?
Just thank you for your time and for listening and for supporting the Women's Foundation for a Greater Memphis. Please contact me at the University of Memphis if you'd like to collaborate in some regard, and we're happy to have you. Thank you so much.
And yeah, I would like to say thank you for inviting me to participate. It's a wonderful experience. I'm glad I got to meet with everybody today. And just know that I've seen some pieces of the chat pop up that this isn't the end of the conversation, right? We see that it's an ongoing conversation. Let it be the start of many conversations, right? So the many passions are being united here, and that's great.
Thank you.
Awesome. And again, please do call or email me if you'd like to continue the conversation and learn more about the Women's Foundation for a Greater Memphis. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.